Hey guys, it's Sam, and this is my next installment in my fall recommendations. And today we're talking about sentient houses. Sentient, kind of haunted, but mostly sentient. That's the vibe. This is not an exhaustive list. These are some of my favorites. So first we have Starling House by Alex E. Harrow. This is a story about a woman who's always been fascinated with this house in her town. This is almost like a late summer horror adjacent fantasy, and she's always been fascinated by this house called Starling House, and the inhabitants have always been very mysterious. Like, no one really knows who lives there. And then one day she kind of gets pulled into working at the house and kind of chosen by the house. Like, the house actually kind of like grabs her at the gate and is like, come. And the house is sentient. It has like a whole personality. It like changes depending on how it's feeling and like if it enjoys the person that's in the house. As it's getting like cleaned and stuff, it like has a personality about that, and like things around the house change if it's like happy or not, or it'll make things harder for people if it's happy or not, which is the kind of sentient house I really enjoy. Next we have The Last Tale of the Flower Bride by Rashi Chakshi. Very similar vibes of kind of house to Starling House. So this house is less like a creepy feeling for people, but it has this like magical sense to it. It is, again, this older house that the story like kind of takes place in. There's sort of like two timelines. At one, like in the present timeline, the characters like go to this house at one point, and in the past timeline, like the main character kind of grows up around this house. So the house again is sentient. It likes certain people. It enjoys like certain people. You know, they talk about the house loving people and things like that, and it doesn't want them to leave sometimes. Like, it will get upset and like, you know, have a rug trip somebody or something. So yeah, it has that like sentient quality without really being scary. Next we have Mexican Gothic by Silvia Moreno Garcia. This is much more of a haunted house situation. So this is a adult horror, and it's more of that like there's a genre of horror book that this is, and again, sort of like this sentient house thing. And the house definitely has these like elements of, I think at one point when she goes there, like it's breathing. Basically, Mexican Gothic is a story about a woman who's, I think it's her cousin, marries into this white wealthy family, and this is taking place like in Mexico and like I think the 40s or 50s. And so she goes to be like, what's happening with this cousin, and then discovers like all this weird shit about this house. And so you're kind of like, is the house haunted? Is there something else going on in the house? What is happening? Like, people see things in the house, I think hear things in the house, like stuff happens in the house, but you don't know if it's magic, if it's paranormal, if it's something science-based. And that's the kind of creepy haunted house that I like. Like, I don't tend to like haunted houses that are actually outright haunted. I'm not a big ghost girl, but like houses where you're like, I'm not sure what exactly is going on. And maybe it ends up being haunted, actually, but like you're not sure until the end. That's the kind of house I like. Then we have Thistle Foot by Jenna Rose Nethercott. Probably one of my favorite sentient houses. I like all of these. But this is Baba Yaga's house. So this is following the descendants of Baba Yaga who inherit her house, which is the house on chicken legs, iconic witch house. And the house is sentient. And so the house, again, loves people and all of that. But in addition to that, like what we talked about, there's other two books, you also get chapters in this book from the house's perspective. I love it so much. So the house is kind of telling the story mostly of its past and like of Baba Yaga, and there is a lot of like, this is mostly like the Jewish programs that were happening, and so there is a lot of like generational trauma stuff being talked about, but like the house is telling stories, the house is Thistlefoot, and the house is telling stories about its past and kind of like, is this the real story? Is this the made up story? How do stories become folklore and myth and things? I love the house. The house is so great. The house having chapters, amazing. And lastly, we have A Study in Drowning by Ava Reed. This is a house that is in the like same vibes as like a Crimson Peak house. So I consider this like Crimson Peak vibes with water instead of blood. That's kind of what this house is. So in that, if you've watched Crimson Peak, which if you haven't, you should. If you like gothic horror at all, Crimson Peak is so fucking good. But A Study in Drowning is that you have a woman who shows up at this house because she is hired to be like the architect for this author who like recently passed. There's a bunch of mystery around this, so it's like a dark academia. Her academic rival is there with her, but the house is very like, I would say it's less sentient and more just like, what is going on with this house? Like, it's just creepy. There's a lot of mystery there and just water. Like, it's waterlogged. It's too close to an ocean that's essentially like taking it over, and so there's parts of the house that are totally underwater and like all that. So yeah, if you enjoy a gothic atmospheric house, this is a vibe. And again, it's one of these things where you're like, you're not sure if things are happening in the house because they're actually happening or because there's something like magical or paranormal going on. Love that. So yeah, these are some of my favorite sentient haunted houses. Comment down below and let me know some of your favorites. Thank you all for watching. I'll see you guys soon. Bye.